What is going on, Fight Feeders? Welcome back to Fite Feed. We're going to be breaking down the UFC Fight Night card that is happening on November 8th. We are back at the Apex 2 weeks in a row here, but this is a nice little tease for us as we're all gearing up for UFC 322, which is going to be a generational type card. But on 11/8, we got the return of Lucas Tracy's former friend, training partner, Muslim Salikov, who just got a huge KO win in his last outing against Carlos Leal. He'll be making his way back on 11/8. We've also got Rude Boy Randy Brown coming back in the main event against Gabriel Bonfim. This is a fun matchup. A few others on here. We got Josh Hokit, who's coming from Contender Series. And we also have Brian Battle. Sorry, that's Jacqueline Cavalcanti. I think she looks just like Brian Battle, though. Like the Pooh Bear version of Brian Battle, not the current version of Brian Battle. But lots of actually really fun fights on this card. We're going to go ahead and go through the entire card from start to finish. I'll give you guys not only the breakdown that we do on Fite Feed, where showing you guys all of the different stats for each fighter, but then I'll also break down strengths, weaknesses, keys to victory, and I'll tell you who I think is going to win in each matchup. Right before we dive in, all I ask, please give this video a like, guys. Hype this video up if you think that it's deserving of that. And also, I would love to hear from you guys in the comments. Let me know who you're picking on this fight night or in each fight of this fight night. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, guys, first fight of the night, we've got Robert Valentin versus Jesus of Nazareth, or otherwise known as Jackson McVey. Robert Valentin's 30 years old, 6'2" with a 77-inch reach, 10-6 as a pro. No success yet in the UFC, 0-3 in the UFC thus far. He has 3 wins by way of knockout at a 30% knockout rate, 6 wins by way of submission, a 60% submission rate, 1 win by way of decision, a 10% decision rate, giving him a 90% finishing rate overall. When we look at his losses, Robert Valentin has 3 losses by way of knockout. That is 50% of his losses. 1 loss by way of submission, which is 17% of his losses overall. And 2 losses by way of decision, a 33% decision loss rate. Taking a look at his last 4 fights, he had a very brutal knockout KO loss to Teba Gaudier in his last outing. That was back in July. Prior to that, he was out-wrestled in 2 fights, one against Torres Finney, which happened to be one of the most boring fights I've ever watched. Not necessarily Valentin's fault, he just couldn't stop the takedowns. And then before that, a loss, which was a TKO loss to Ryan Loder. That was the Ultimate Fighter finale that happened back in August of 2024. Before that, he had a win over someone named Zoran Dodd. Not sure who that is, but he had a win over that person back when they fought. Now, taking a look at Jackson McVey, 26 years old, 6'4" with a 77-inch reach, a 6-1 professional record, 0-1 in the UFC. Taking a look at Jackson McVey's wins, he has 3 wins by way of KO, which is 50% KO rate, 3 wins by way of submission, a 50% submission rate, giving him a whopping 100% finishing rate because he's never gone to decision. As mentioned, Jackson McVey has 1 career loss. That actually happened not too long ago in his debut in the UFC back in July as well. I believe it was on the same card as Robert Valentin, if I'm not mistaken. And that 1 loss came by way of submission against Bruno Ferreira. And when we take a look at his other losses or his other fights, because he only has 1 loss, he had a win over Garner, a win over Fowler, and a win over Williams prior to making his debut in the UFC. All right, guys, now I'm going to tell you guys and give you my perspective on Robert Valentin and Jackson McVey's strengths, weaknesses, keys to victory. So Robert Valentin, guys, he is a sharp striker. We saw him get a brutal KO win on Ultimate Fighter and actually he also got a submission win, but he did knock out his opponent, which was a guy who was on Valentina Shevchenko's team, had never even been dropped before. Valentin elbowed him and knocked his ass out. So very good striking from him. He does have that finishing instinct, goes in there to try to get a win by way of damaging or knocking his opponents out. He has decent cardio and pace as well. When we look at his weaknesses, though, he really struggles, guys, in the grappling department, specifically takedown defense. He was taken down so many times against Ryan Loder, taken down by Torres Finney, and just doesn't really have an answer, in my opinion, for a lot of the ground game that his opponents have brought to these matchups, okay? I think Robert Valentin, guys, in this matchup, his keys to victory are staying away from any type of clinching situation, staying away from any type of ground situation that Jackson McVey may try to bring, and he just needs to stay crispy on the feet, keep his distance, landing his strikes, seeing if he can be first in hurting Jackson McVey and making him second guess doing anything on the ground. When I look at Jackson McVey, guys, his strengths are not only is he super young, but he's also a very big, tall middleweight, at 6'4". He brings a very unique style. I think one thing about Jackson McVey, his striking style mixed with his awkward grappling style makes him a tricky customer on the feet because he has weird ways of being able to land shots, whether they be, the long straights or getting himself into a clinching situation and using the knees up the middle. Has very good clinch work, at least from what I've seen, and also finds very creative ways to go from a clinch situation to the ground or latching up submissions from the clinch on the feet. Weaknesses for Jackson McVey, I think that he may be a little bit susceptible to leg kicks. I've seen in a couple of his fights where his opponents have landed leg kicks and have been able to somewhat compromise him, but obviously not enough to where they were able to get a win. I just think that that is one weakness. I think another weakness for him is just a lack of XP, right? He's got one UFC fight thus far, only one loss, but only 7 total fights as a professional. I think also because of his awkward, scrappy style, I think he can be a bit reckless in some of the exchanges on the feet, leaving him to his chin kind of wide open to be touched, which is something to worry about as well. His keys to victory is he just needs to utilize the style that he has. Get in close, try to get that clinch going, and land some stuff up the middle. I think that if he is able to show off that clinch a bit, land some stuff up the middle there, that he'll get Robert Valentin thinking a lot more about the strikes, and that is going to open up the opportunity for him to latch up some sort of submission. I see him submitting Robert Valentin, to be honest with you guys, probably in round, I want to say round 2. I don't know if he's going to get a round 1 finish here. I think it's going to be a round 2 finish, potentially a decision win, actually, if he doesn't get it. So I'm thinking that he gets a submission, though, in round 2. Guys, the next fight on the card is my boy Miles Johns. He's back, and he's fighting Daniel Marcos. Miles Johns is 31 years old, 5'7" with a 68-inch reach, 15-4 as a professional, 6-4 in the UFC. Miles Johns has 4 wins by way of knockout, that is 27% knockout rate, 2 wins by way of submission, a 13% submission rate, 9 wins by way of decision, a 60% decision rate, giving him a finishing rate of 40%. When we take a look at his losses, he has 1 loss by way of KO, which is 25% of his losses, 1 loss by way of submission, which is another 25% of his losses, and then 2 losses by way of decision, 50% of his losses. Miles Johns' last 4 fights, he had a split decision loss to Matsumoto not too long ago. I personally believe that he won that fight, in my opinion. If you really want my honest opinion and honest take, I did pick Miles Johns, and I thought he should have gotten 2 of those 3 rounds. It is what it is. Before that, he had a loss to Diego Lima. Prior to that, he had 2 wins, 1 over De Andrade and 1 over Cody Gibson. Taking a look at Daniel Marcos, 32 years old, 5'7" with a 69-inch reach, 17-1 as a professional, 4-1 in the UFC. Marcos has 8 of his professional wins by way of knockout, a 47% knockout rate. He has 0 wins by way of submission and 9 wins by way of decision, which is 53% of his wins by way of decision, giving him a 47% finishing rate overall. Marcos only has 1 professional loss that was by way of decision in his last outing, giving him a 100% decision loss rate. And taking a look at his last 4 fights, he lost to Montel Jackson in his last outing, as I mentioned. Before that, he had a win over Adrian Yanez. Before that, a win over John Castaneda. And before that, a no contest over Arichi Lang. Taking a look at the strengths, weaknesses, keys to victory for Miles Johns and Daniel Marcos, I believe that Miles Johns is a very solid fighter, guys. He's short, stocky, but has hands on him. He has an ability to land, especially his overhands. I do like the way he switches stances as well on the feet. Very strong pressure and very good volume striking, but has the ability to also land those heavy shots that either hurt the opponent, drop the opponent. He's not as much of a KO artist, obviously, but does have enough punch to get his opponents thinking, right? I also think that Miles Johns has solid, not only takedown defense, but just solid grappling. He's good at doing reversals, good at getting out of positions and getting control. So pretty solid all around. Some of his weaknesses, though, he is susceptible to precise counters. If he's going up against a striker who's got those crispy hands or crispy counters, he is susceptible to being caught by those. Sometimes he can be a bit inconsistent or fade in his fights, especially when he's going up against durable opponents. We kind of saw this against Matsumoto a bit. He was kind of fading earlier than I expected, at least. I also think that Miles Johns has, at times, because he's susceptible to those counter shots, he seems to be open to taking a lot of damage or more damage than he should when he's on the feet at times. The keys of victory for Miles Johns, guys, is he just needs to utilize his pressure, utilize the volume that he brings with his striking, be first against Daniel Marcos, and do not allow Daniel Marcos to take this to the ground, which is likely what he'll try to do. If Miles Johns can keep up that takedown defense, keep Marcos away from getting those takedowns or even getting like clinching positions, or even if Marcos is initiating those takedowns, finding a way to hit that nifty and crafty Miles Johns reversal where he can then get positions or get control on the ground. Those are going to be the keys to victory. I think if he can stay consistent with that, he will win the fight. Now, taking a look at Daniel Marcos. He's an aggressive, durable, forward, cardio forward type fighter. He has good pressure scrambles, very good takedowns, and good on the ground. Like when he gets guys down, he tends to have very good ground control. I do think that he's most effective in close quarters and on the ground, not much of a striker at range by any means. I think that when I look at his weaknesses, although Marcos only lost once, I do think a lot of his wins, guys, have kind of come by way of like robbery decisions, if you will. I think that I'm less impressed with his ability on the feet. I think in fights, it seems like he relies heavily on getting those takedowns. And it seems as though when he has trouble with that things don't go his way, in my opinion. I think he struggles against higher volume opponents, and he also has less precise striking on the feet, making him a bit more open to a fighter who's got volume and crispy striking. His keys to victory are going to be staying in close, using his pressure and using his cardio to, try to implement that grappling, get Miles Johns down and try to hold him there and then just win based off of that. I see this fight, guys, going to decision, but I see it going to decision on the side of Miles Johns. I think he's going to get it done. Although he's lost a couple, he's still super solid, also still really young, 31 years old. I think that he will be able to implement the style that he has. And I think that style will probably be a problem for Daniel Marcos because he's going to be thinking about the strikes quite a bit. Miles Johns can kind of mix it up everywhere as well. So I just think he's going to have a better opportunity in this matchup to get the win. All right, guys, fight number 3. We've got Tecia Pennington versus Denise Gomes. Pennington is 36 years old, 5'1", with a 60.5-inch reach, 15-7 as a professional, 11-7 in the UFC. Pennington has 1 win by way of KO, a 7% knockout rate, 1 win by way of submission, a 7% submission rate, and 13 wins by way of decision, an 87% decision rate, giving her a finishing rate, a whopping finishing rate of 14%. I'm sorry, 13%. And if you guys are questioning why 7 plus 7 equals 13 there, it's probably just a rounding thing in Excel, so don't worry about that. Taking a look at Pennington's losses, she has 7 career losses, all by way of decision, giving her a 100% decision loss rate. Her last 4 fights, she had a win over Luana Pinheiro, a win over Carla Esparza, which was a huge robbery if you want my honest opinion. Before that, a loss to Baby Shark Tabitha Ricci, and before that, a loss to Mackenzie Dern, who's now the champ of the strawweight division. Taking a look at her opponent, Denise Gomes. 25 years old, 5'2", with a 62-inch reach, or I'm sorry, a 63-inch reach, Gomes is 11-3 in her professional career, 5-2 in the UFC. Gomes has 7 wins by way of knockout, a 64% knockout rate, 4 wins by way of decision, a 36% decision rate, 0 wins by way of sub, so those are not being called out there. That gives Denise Gomes a 64% finishing rate. Gomes has 1 career loss by way of knockout, which is 33% of her losses. Her other losses came by way of decision, so that's 2 losses by way of decision, a 67% decision loss rate. Looking at her last 4 fights, she had a brutal knockout win over Elise Reed not too long ago. Before that, a win over Karolina Kolokajic, and before that, a win over Eduarda Mora. And her 1 loss in recent times was to Angela Hill, which happened prior to her going on this current 3-fight win streak that she's on. Taking a look at these ladies' strengths, weaknesses, keys to victory, I think that Tecia Pennington as a striker is very well-rounded, very experienced, has very solid movement and footwork that keeps her not only out of the way of danger from her opponent, but also allows her to set up her own strikes on the feet. Solid boxing, very technical on the feet as well. I also think she has strong durability and a decent fight IQ. It's probably a reason why she was able to win over the judges in a fight against Carla Esparza that I believe she lost. Her weaknesses are less aggressive in her ability to finish fights. As you guys can tell by the stats, she has 14% or 13% of her wins by finish. So very unlikely for her to even get finishes based on that. Very limited ground game, I would say, as well, which it could be something to worry about here. Probably not, though, because Denise Gomes has 0 wins by way of submission. I think that also she can be not only outpaced, outvolumed, but when her opponents have some more pop to their strikes, she can kind of be a bit weary on the feet and not land or even be as active as we would normally see her. Her keys to victory in this fight is going to be maintaining distance, mixing up the low kicks quite a bit. She needs to mix in the low kicks and utilize her jab very well. She wants to stay far away from the back of the cage. If her back is up against the cage against Denise Gomes, she's going to be in big trouble. So she needs to use that movement and footwork, that good fight IQ to maintain distance and ensure she's not getting backed up against the cage, because Gomes, if she gets her against the cage, I think could land a big shot. Now, taking a look at Denise Gomes, her strength, she is a very explosive and athletic striker on the feet, especially in this division. She's like a spring that's tensed up and is just looking to unleash that tension and power. She is super dangerous at close range and also has very good scrambles if they get into a grappling or takedown situation. Weaknesses for Denise Gomes, she's less experienced in these higher level fights. She hasn't fought someone like Tecia Pennington, who has a ton of experience just yet. I think she can also be a bit reckless in searching for that finish on the feet. It's definitely fun to watch, right? It's a fun style to engage and watch with, but I think it can be also very aggressive and put her in danger a lot of times because she'll keep her chin wide open while she's swinging and banging. I also think that Denise Gomes has shown some struggles with more experienced and technical boxers in the past, but that's not something that I think is super detrimental because I think no matter what, in her fight, she's always able to find strikes. Even if she hasn't won, she's been able to at least hurt or tag her opponent at least a couple times. I think that the keys to victory for Denise Gomes are staying on that pressure, being aware of Tecia Pennington's footwork, trying to set up traps where Tecia Pennington is moving, right? If Tecia Pennington is moving far to one side, I think Denise Gomes needs to be very cerebral in there, calculate and download the data she's getting from Tecia Pennington, seeing where she's moving, set traps on the feet, and try to not only keep it in close quarters, but even try to get Pennington's back against the cage so Denise Gomes can go to work and try to land some of those big shots and put her out of there. Guys, this is a hard one to pick, honestly, because I have had success going with Tecia Pennington in the past. This one, though, I feel like taking a look at the age, and, I know Pennington has been active, but not crazy active. I just think that going up against Gomes is going to be a big struggle because I think Gomes is going to be bringing a level of power that Pennington hasn't really gone up against in recent times. And I feel that is going to edge this fight much so in the favor of Denise Gomes. I see Gomes either getting a finish by way of knockout or potentially just overpowering on the feet for 3 rounds and winning a unanimous decision. I'm going to say Gomes finds a fucking KO, even though it's probably unlikely. I'm going to go for it. Say it's a late round 3 KO from Gomes. Fight number 4, we got Josh Hokit versus Max Gimenis. As you can see, he is the lock character currently. Josh Hokit is 27 years old, standing at 6 feet 1 inch tall with a 73.5-inch reach. He's like the modern day Cormier, even though Cormier was like 5'10". Hokit's a little bit smaller with a smaller reach there at the heavyweight division, that is. He has 6 wins, 0 losses as a pro. He is 0-0 in the UFC because he just got a contract in the last season of Dana White's Contender Series. Hokit has three wins by way of KO, a 50% KO rate, 3 wins by way of submission, a 50% submission rate, 0 wins by decision, giving him a 100% finishing rate. His last 4 fights, he had a win over Guilherme Iriel on Dana White's Contender Series. Before that, a win over Lunsford. Before that, a win over Latu. Before that, a win over Lopez. Max Gimenis, on the other hand, 32 years old. We don't know how tall. We don't know his reach. Nothing online that I can find, guys. I went everywhere I could, just could not find it, and I'm not going to spend any more time looking for that. He is 6-1 as a professional, 0-0 in the UFC. This is his debut fight. He has 4 wins by way of KO, a 67% KO rate, 1 win by way of submission, a 17% submission rate, and 1 win by way of decision, a 17% decision rate, giving him a finishing rate of 83%. Gimenis has 1 professional loss, which came by way of KO. That gives him a 100% KO loss rate. His last 4 fights, win over Peklat, a win over Ott, a win over Graham, and a win over Bradley. Don't know who any of those guys are. Looking at the strengths, weaknesses, keys to victory for Josh Hokit and Max Gimenis. Josh Hokit, guys, comes with a extreme amount of athleticism. He was a fullback walk-on, I think, at I don't know, I can't remember which college he played for, but I do believe he also he played for the 49ers, even if it was just on the training squad. So he has a ton of athleticism as a professional athlete, a very strong wrestling and grappling, also very solid fight IQ, guys. One thing I saw that Josh Hokit did in his Dana White's Contender Series fight, he had his opponent kind of wrapped up on the feet, and they were close to the cage. He's the first guy I've seen literally kick himself off the cage to push him and his opponent to like the center of the octagon where he was able to get the takedown from it. That was a super high level, high IQ moment. And when you think about it, it's a basic step that he took, but something I haven't seen other fighters do. Also, very high pace and cardio. Like he was able to kind of stay on the feet with his last opponent, where his opponent was landing some big shots, but Hokit was kind of able to stay the course and just use his pace and cardio to completely diminish his opponent. And once he got him down, he showed off. He's got some brutal ground and pound and also has that finishing mentality. He is out there for blood when he goes out there. Definitely got like an edge to him out there. You know, he's definitely not out there to make friends with anybody. Weaknesses for Josh Hokit, I think that he seems a bit less comfortable on the feet, especially if you've watched, you know, even his Contender Series fight or even previous fights. He doesn't always look super polished on the feet. I think that he may be vulnerable on the feet, especially up against a very skilled striker. But I think he's continuously evolving there, and also he trains at Jackson Wink, so he's going to get good looks from a lot of guys, especially John Jones. I think that he also may or could be vulnerable to submission threats because although he's shown off good skills thus far, he hasn't really gone up against it, from what I've seen, anyone who's a true jiu-jitsu ace, which Max Gimenis actually brings to the table in this matchup. I think the keys to victory for Josh Hokit is trying to land on the feet, but not keeping things on the feet very long. He needs to get his takedowns and just overpower with the wrestling ability, get top control, hold Max down, and land those big shots. I can see Josh Hokit finishing this fight by way of a ground and pound TKO if he's able to do that, right? Max Gimenis, on the other hand, strengths for him. He does have some power on the feet. Obviously, his KO rate suggests that as well when you look at the stats. He is an elite black belt in jiu-jitsu, okay? This guy has a 106-46 record in jiu-jitsu. His last jiu-jitsu outing, he is actually at CJI. He lost to Nicky Rodriguez. So Definitely a very skilled grappler when it comes to the jiu-jitsu. I think he's very capable of finishing his fights with big shots on the feet, but also has that submission threat should things get to the ground, right? His weaknesses, I think he's less developed and in his wrestling and his like wrestling ground game. He's obviously got ground game with the jiu-jitsu, but not very good at stopping those takedowns. I think if Josh Hokit is able to latch those up and get ground control, I don't know that Gimenis has that wrestling acumen that can compare to that of Josh Hokit. I also think that on the feet, Gimenis can definitely be reckless. He overcommits on some of his shots that can leave him open and also leave him open to grappling exchanges that he's not ready for. He also has, like I said, defensive gaps in the takedown defense, okay? His main keys to victory against Josh Hokit, keep the fight standing and try to land those big power shots and hurt Josh Hokit. And if he's able to do that, guys, I think that he can easily then try to latch up a submission if things get there to the ground, or just finish the fight off if he lands a big shot. He needs to do his best as well to stop Josh Hokit from landing takedowns, because if Josh Hokit gets on top, he's likely to gain control of this fight and find the win himself. Ultimately, guys, when I compare these two, they're both pretty inexperienced in MMA, but I got to go Josh Hokit. I think that he is very solid, also very quick and agile on the feet for a heavyweight. That is a bit of a different vibe than we've seen with some of the blobs. Obviously, we've seen like the Cyril Gans, the Tom Aspinalls, but I think Josh Hokit is now going to be kind of in that same category as well. I think he gets the win here. I'm going to say a round 1 finish by ground and pound TKO. Fight number 5, we got Mayra Bueno Silva versus Jacqueline Cavalcanti, or in other words, Bryan Battle. She's like the reskin of Bryan Battle. Mayra Bueno Silva is 34 years old, 5'6", a 66.5-inch reach, 10-5 as a professional, 5-5 in the UFC. Silva has 1 win by way of KO, a 10% knockout rate, 7 wins by way of submission, a 70% submission rate, 2 wins by way of decision, a 20% decision rate, giving her a finishing rate of 80% overall. When we take a look at her losses, Silva's lost once by way of KO, a 20% KO loss rate, 0 losses by way of submission, the rest of her losses coming by way of decision, which is 4 losses by way of decision, a 80% decision loss rate. Her last 4 fights, guys, not looking too shabby here. Or it is looking shabby, I guess. A loss to Jazavicius, a loss to Chasson, a loss to Pennington, and a no contest to Home. We did see her win that fight, but it was actually overturned because she accidentally took her Adderall prescription before the fight, which you're not supposed to do. And then she lost to Pennington right after that when they went for the belt. Jacqueline Cavalcanti, Bryan Battle, 28 years old, 5'8", with a 70-inch reach. She is 9-1 as a professional, 4-0 in the UFC. Cavalcanti has 3 wins by way of KO, a 33% KO rate, 0 wins by way of submission, meaning that she has the rest of her wins by way of decision. That is 6 wins by way of decision, a 67% decision rate. Taking a look at Cavalcanti's losses, she has 1 loss that came by way of decision, so she has no losses by way of submission nor KO, but only lost by decision at 100%. And her last 4 fights, she had a win over Avila, a win over Nora Cornole, which is a great win, a win over Nunez, Josiane Nunez that is, and then a win over Farron. Taking a look at the strengths, weaknesses, keys to victory for Mayra Bueno Silva. She is a very high-level black belt in jiu-jitsu, guys. We've seen her get tons of different submissions in the UFC, very aggressive with her grappling and scrambles, and also very good clinch work and control on the ground. When she gets people down, she's looking for submissions. She likes to get the wins by way of sub. Weaknesses for Mayra Bueno Silva. The main one I can call out, guys, does not do well, especially in longer fights. If we saw that against Pennington, she completely gassed out and got the F up on the feet and on the ground. Very vulnerable to strikes, too. I think that Mayra Bueno Silva, we saw it against Macy Chiasson. She definitely is open on the feet and gets tagged quite a bit, guys. I think that because of that, we see her like oftentimes overextending, which leads to some of her takedown attempts actually. But most of the time, I think that overextension leaves her open to her opponents getting like better ground control or positioning and also just landing better shots overall. Her keys to victory in this fight, guys, she needs to get Cavalcanti down to the ground and she needs to go for submissions in any way she can because that is where she's going to have the upper hand in this matchup. Taking a look at Jacqueline Cavalcanti, though, she is very durable. She's improving with her striking defense, very good cardio in her fights. She shows that she can be very aggressive in her transitions and her scrambles. I think she's also a decent striker on the feet. When I take a look at her weaknesses, she's definitely less experienced at the top level than Mayra Bueno Silva. Not necessarily her fault, but, it is what it is. She just does not have as much experience, especially at the higher level of the UFC. She can be vulnerable to high-level grapplers, but she does have a very solid takedown defense of 84%. I also think that Cavalcanti can be a bit weary or she can struggle sometimes with keeping up that volume with her striking. Like sometimes you'll see her open strong and like as the fight goes on, it slows quite a bit. So I think that is a weakness because she's going to want to keep momentum throughout this fight, especially if Silva's able to latch up some takedowns. And the keys to victory for her is keep the fight standing, use that takedown defense that she has and stop those takedowns, land on the feet and keep her movement and footwork aligned throughout, because if she can do that and stay away from the grappling and takedown attempts of Mayra Bueno Silva, I think Cavalcanti easily gets this win by staying away from the grappling and landing on the outside. Ultimately, guys, that is how I feel like this fight's going to go. I see Cavalcanti getting a win by way of decision, but I also can see, like when I've played it in my head, I've also seen Mayra Bueno Silva catch her in something and submit her. So take that. Take what you will from that. I'm going to call it for Cavalcanti getting the win by way of decision. The next fight on the card, we got Adrian Yanez versus Cristian Quiñonez. Adrian Yanez is 31 years old, 5'7" with a 70-inch reach, 17-6 as a professional, 6-3 in the UFC. Yanez has 11 wins by way of knockout, a 65% KO rate, 2 wins by way of submission, a 12% submission rate, and 4 wins by way of decision, a 24% decision rate, giving Adrian Yanez a 76% finishing rate overall. Taking a look at his losses, he has 2 losses by way of KO at 33%, 0 losses by submission, the rest of his losses coming by way of decision, which is 4 losses by way of decision, 67% decision loss rate. His last 4 fights, he had a loss to Daniel Marcos, which I think was a split decision loss. Before that, a win over Salvador, which is a great win for him, got him to the bounce back. Before that, he lost to Martinez, and before that, he lost to Rob Font. Taking a look at Cristian Quiñonez, 29 years old, 5'8" with a 70-inch reach, 18-5 as a professional, 1-2 in the UFC. Quiñonez has 10 wins by way of knockout, 56% KO rate, 3 wins by way of submission, a 17% submission rate, 5 wins by way of decision, a 28% decision rate, giving him a 72% finishing rate overall. Taking a look at his losses, Quiñonez has lost by way of KO 2 times, a 40% KO loss rate, and 3 times he has lost by way of submission, a 60% submission loss rate. Taking a look at the last 4 fights for Quiñonez, he lost to Raoni Barcelos. Prior to that, he lost to Hokit, and then he had a win over Taha and a win over Jamall. Taking a look at the strengths, weaknesses, keys to victory, Adrian Yanez, guys, he is a very strong striker. Some of the crispiest hands in this division in the UFC. Very high volume, good counters, very good boxing footwork and boxing IQ, guys. I love to see Adrian Yanez get his work done in the octagon. Weaknesses for Yanez is that sometimes, guys, I think he gets a bit too overconfident with his striking, leaving himself open. We saw this against Rob Font. Rob Font grabbed the back of his head and uppercut him like he was his little brother and found the KO. Yanez also has some limited grappling, I would say, in ground game. We haven't seen a ton of it. I think also Yanez has shown, especially against Jonathan Martinez, now Jonathan Martinez is one of the best leg kickers in the game, though. But Yanez got his leg absolutely tarnished by Jonathan Martinez. So I think that when we look at those weaknesses, that's definitely a big weakness to call out. I think that Yanez keys to victories here, guys. Keep that slick boxing on the feet and use those boxing skills to just outbox technically and then also out-volume Quiñonez if he can. Just land more consistently throughout this fight. Doesn't need to be, I think, caught up trying to get the finish. If he can find the KO finish with the hands, by all means, go for it. But I think if he can just stay slick, stay good on his defense, and land more, he'll get the win here by way of decision. He has some of the best angles and movement in his boxing. So if he can mix all of that together, I think he gets the win. Those are his keys to victory. Quiñonez, his strengths are he definitely has power in his hands, has the ability to finish a fight if he lands a solid shot. So definitely going to have a nice finishing ability there. Very aggressive and forward moving style as well. Good timing in counters when he sets them up right. His weaknesses, definitely a less technical striker on the feet. Definitely more of a brawler, right? He is more of that risk reward style. I'm just going to walk forward, try to land a big shot and put you out. He's susceptible to some of those volume punchers because of this, especially because he's not as technical. I think that he also has struggled in the past against higher level boxers, which he is going up against a pretty high level boxer in Yanez. Keys to victory for Quiñonez. He needs to catch Yanez with a powerful counter shot if he can. Needs to land early with some mustard. If he does, he has a way of potentially just nullifying the game of Yanez or even, putting him out with a shot. I think if he can push the pace and the pressure early on, look for those openings, stay throwing those strikes, but stay throwing with that mustard on it. He can't try to out-volume Yanez unless he's significantly worked on his technical ability in the boxing game. I feel like he needs to just look for that big shot, try to land when he can with that big shot, and see where it takes him. That will be his keys to victory in this fight. Because of that, guys, I got to go with my boy, Adrian Yanez, getting the win here. I just think that he'll be able to out-volume, outpace, and use that technical boxing skill to beat Quiñonez by way of decision. All right, guys, fight number 7. We've got Jamall Emmers versus Hyder Amil. Jamall Emmers, 36 years old, 5'10", 74-inch reach, 21-8 as a pro, 4-4 in the UFC. He has 9 wins by way of knockout, 43% KO rate, 3 wins by way of submission, a 14% submission rate, 9 wins by way of decision, a 43% decision rate, giving Emmers a 57% finishing rate overall. Emmers has 3 losses by way of KO, a 37.5% KO loss rate, 2 losses by way of submission, a 25% submission loss rate, and 3 losses by way of decision, a 38% decision loss rate. His last 4 fights, he had a win over Miranda, a loss to Landwehr, a win over Bezukja, I can't ever say that guy's name, and then a loss to Jack Jenkins, which is a split decision loss, which has pretty much aged nicely because Jack Jenkins is very good. Hyder Amil, on the other hand, 35 years old, 5'9" with a 70-inch reach, 11-1 as a pro, 3-1 in the UFC. Hyder Amil has 6 wins by way of KO, a 55% KO rate, 1 win by way of submission, a 9% submission rate, 4 wins by way of decision, a 36% decision rate, giving him a 64% finishing rate overall. Amil has 1 professional loss. We saw that happen not too long ago, actually. I think it was back in June. He lost to Jose Delgado by way of KO in the first round, pretty much the first 40 seconds of the fight. Before that fight, he had a very back and forth close war with Gomes. He just was more active on the feet. Before that, a win over Yang Li and a win over Garcia prior to that. Taking a look at these guys' skills, strengths, weaknesses, keys to victory. Jamall Emmers is very well-rounded, guys. Very strong striking and very long for the weight class. Good pressure and cardio. I also think knowledgeable in his control and his pace, but I think when I look at his strengths, it's really that crispy. He's got a very crispy 1-2, very good long punches. We saw him get a signature KO win pretty recently. His weaknesses, though, Emmers can obviously, I think, be a bit inconsistent against heavier punchers, which could be an issue against Hyder Amil. He sometimes can take more damage in exchanges, right? Like when he tries to go and trade one to take one, he usually actually gets has gotten the worst end of that, right? We saw against Nate Landwehr where they were trading. He was landing. Nate Landwehr lands an uppercut from hell and drops Jamall Emmers out cold. So I think that those are main weaknesses I'd call for Jamall Emmers, just a bit inconsistent at times, especially in those war exchanges. His keys to victory, guys, I think he needs to use the volume striking, use that reach advantage to his benefit here, right? He's got a 4-inch reach advantage, so he needs to stay on the outside, land with the long 1-2s, but doesn't want to overextend himself or get caught up in a trap from Hyder Amil. I think if he can land a crispy 1-2 on the chin, has a chance of putting Hyder Amil out. But if he can avoid those reckless exchanges, avoid that pressure that Amil's going to be bringing to him, and just land crispy counters, I think he can definitely either close this out by way of KO. I mean, it'll be hard to say if Amil is fully recovered from, he got knocked out in his last outing. But I think Jamall Emmers likely more of a chance that he can kind of mix in the grappling too and maybe get a submission in this fight. But I definitely would see him using these tools to potentially get a decision win. Hyder Amil is a power puncher, aggressive with his approach. We saw, Dana White, I think, talk about how he landed like an 80-punch combo or whatever it was. Very good on the feet, guys. Very slick and fast. He also has very good scrambling when it comes to the grappling exchanges. He's capable of ending fights with the strikes and potential submission, but more so with the strikes, right? When I look at his weaknesses, he can have at times be a little bit less consistent with volume, but he's very good about staying on the volume. We saw him get a win over Gomes because of that. I think that Amil, where he's going to struggle in a weakness he's shown, is just he can be susceptible to grappling and wrestling from his opponents. I think he can also be a bit over-aggressive at times, leaving him open for the counters and strikes of his opponents. Probably likely that what happened against Jose Delgado. His keys to victory is keeping this obviously in closer distance, given that he is not only the shorter, but shorter reach fighter. He needs to get inside and stay aggressive and have Jamall Emmers on the back foot as much as possible. Needs to do his best to fight off any wrestling or grappling, be very quick with those scrambles or sprawling. So just has to be on point with the sprawls and the scrambles, and just keep that high activity throughout each round. Not to gas himself out early, but stay consistent over the course of the 3 rounds in the volume. And he has a chance, especially if he's keeping Emmers on the back foot, has a very high chance to win by way of decision. Could potentially also catch Emmers with something heavy and put him out, right? In this fight, guys, just based off Hyder Amil's last outing, I know Emmers has been a bit inconsistent, so I can see why anybody might go Amil. He did fight Jose Delgado, who's a beast in his own right. I feel like Emmers, though, is going to be able to utilize that reach and stay on the outside and pick up a win here, whether it be by way of decision or potentially getting a finish on the feet. I'm going to lean Emmers by way of decision. All right, guys, fight number 8. This one is a banger, okay? We've got Marco Tulio, Norma Dumont's boyfriend and a beast in the middleweight division, versus Cristian Leroy Duncan, otherwise known as CLD. Marco Tulio's 31 years old, 6 feet tall with a 74-inch reach. 74.5-inch reach. He has 14-1 as a professional, 2-0 in the UFC. Tulio has 10 wins by way of KO, a 71% KO rate, 1 win by way of submission, a 7% submission rate, and then 3 wins by way of decision, a 21% decision rate, giving Marco Tulio a 79% finishing rate overall. Tulio has only lost once in his professional career, and that was by way of KO. Taking a look at his last 4 fights, had a devastating KO win over Tresean Gore. It was a back-and-forth scrap. Gore actually hurt Tulio once on the feet there in that fight. Before that, a win over Ihor Otieria. Before that, a win over Ducios, and a win over Dos Santos. Don't know who those guys are. CLD, on the other hand, 30 years old, 6'2" with a 79-inch reach. He's going to have a significant reach advantage here. He is 12-2 as a professional, 5-2 in the UFC. CLD has 9 wins by way of KO, 75% KO rate, 1 win by way of submission, an 8% submission rate, 2 wins by way of decision, a 17% decision rate, giving CLD an 83% finishing rate overall. CLD has lost twice in his career. Both of those losses came by way of decision, giving him a 100% decision loss rate. His last 4 fights got a brutal win over Eric Anders in his last outing. Before that, a win over Pulev, who came in on short notice, if I'm not mistaken. Before that, a loss to RoboCop, Gregory Rodriguez. And before that, a big win over Brenson Ribeiro. Taking a look at Marco Tulio and CLD's strengths, weaknesses, keys to victory. Marco Tulio, guys, is such a heavy puncher, brings such an interesting striking style, very good about mixing up his strikes, going to the body, going to the head, throwing spinning strikes, just very all over the place in terms of the tools and the arsenal he has in the striking. Very good chin and durability, too. He has been hit with big shots, but we haven't seen him get KO'd in the UFC just yet, knock on wood. Very aggressive, too, and very on the gas from start to finish, always looking to finish, but I also think that, guys, will lead into a weakness. I think Tulio can be a bit overzealous sometimes with his strikes, which leaves him open. It's how he got caught against Tresean Gore. I worry about his gas tank with the amount of volume. I think he broke a record in his last fight for the most strikes in middleweight thrown in one round, if I'm not mistaken. He can also be susceptible to leg kicks and counters, and also at times can show that he is more about like a brawling style than being a technical type striker. So in this matchup, guys, his keys to victory are using that aggression, using that forward pressure, making sure to land those powerful shots that have CLD thinking. If he can get CLD in his head and thinking and on the back foot, I think Marco Tulio has every opportunity of getting him backed against the cage, landing heavy shots, maybe putting him out with a KO. Giving him the first KO loss of his career, or potentially getting a win by way of decision, but just out striking and having more aggression than CLD, getting the win by way of decision. Now, CLD, on the other hand, this guy is the polar opposite, a very technical striker, much more like cerebral with his approach in terms of the strikes he puts together. Also, very good movement and footwork. Also, a well-rounded ability to grapple, especially in the clinch. I would say, that can lead into a weakness for CLD. Sometimes, like, CLD has that. He has a style, guys, where he is totally fine just kind of grabbing his opponent and winning by way of, like, holding them against the cage. We saw that against Polyaev. He did hurt Polyaev at the end, but I do think that he is less proven against those knockout artists in his career. And I think also because of that, I think CLD can also sometimes be way less of a volume striker on the feet. Like, he's technical, but times I think he'll let his opponents walk him down and he won't be as active. He'll just be more focused on not being hit. I also think he has less experience in some of those higher pressure fights, right? This is a bit of a higher pressure fight. He's going up against a guy who's a true finisher. Keys of victory for CLD, landing leg kicks at range. He needs to land, obviously, the straight punches at range as well. Try to use that technical kickboxing style he has to land from range on Marco Tulio. If he can maintain that distance, utilize the movement, mix in takedowns and his clinch game when he needs to. I don't want him to go over the top on that. I would rather see him just mix it in when he needs it. Then he has every opportunity to either potentially catch Tulio and hurt him on the feet, maybe getting a finish. I think that if CLD is to implement like his clinch game as well, it's likely we see him win by way of decision against Tulio. But guys, in this matchup, I'm going to stick with Marco Tulio being just that more aggressive, on the gas striker who's going to look to try and hurt and finish CLD from start to finish. I think Marco Tulio has a chance of knocking out CLD, giving him his first KO loss. We shall see if that happens. I'll call it for a round 2 KO for Marco Tulio. All right, guys. Fight number 9. We got shoot him in his back like he Ricky Simón versus Raoni Barcelos. Ricky Simón is 33 years old, 5'6", with a 69-inch reach, 22 wins, 6 losses in his professional career, 10-5 in the UFC. Simón has 7 wins by way of KO, a 32% KO rate, 4 wins by way of submission, and 18% submission rate, 11 wins by way of decision, a 50% decision rate, giving Simón a 50% finishing rate overall. He has 2 losses by way of KO, which is 33% of his losses, 1 loss by way of submission, 17% of his losses, and 3 losses by way of decision, a 50% decision loss rate. Simón's last 4 fights had a big win over Cameron Smotherman. Smotherman came in on short notice, but Simón did that thing on him, put that pressure on him, and won. Before that, a brutal and highlight reel KO over Javid Basharat, giving Basharat his first loss of his career. Before that, a loss to Oliveira. Before that, a loss to Mario Bautista. Taking a look at Raoni Barcelos, the Unk of bantamweight. 38 years old, 5'7" with a 67-inch reach. 20 wins, 5 losses in his professional career, 9-4 in the UFC. Barcelos has 8 wins by way of KO, a 40% KO rate, 3 wins by way of submission, a 15% submission rate, 9 wins by way of decision, a 45% decision rate, giving Barcelos a 55% finishing rate overall. Barcelos has 1 loss by way of KO at 20% of his losses, 1 loss by way of submission, another 20% of his losses, and 3 losses by way of decision, 60% of his losses. His last 4 fights, the Unk has just been successful, guys. He got a win over Cody Garbrandt in his last outing. Before that, a win over Peyton Talbot. Before that, a win over Cristian Quiñonez. And before that, a loss to Kyler Phillips. Taking a look at Ricky and Raoni Barcelos' strengths, weaknesses, keys to victory. Ricky Simón, guys, comes with a very strong wrestling and grappling game. Also very high-pressure boxing, very powerful with his boxing. We've seen him, flatline Javid Basharat in the Seattle card. Very good fight IQ and cardio as well. Weaknesses for Ricky Simón. Also, Ricky Simón's the only one to beat Merab Dvalishvili by finish, okay? Remember that. Ricky Simón has shown struggles in the past, especially against highly technical strikers. We've seen that in his previous fights. He may be able to be outpaced in some of these striking exchanges. We saw Cameron Smotherman, even although Cameron was getting smothered, man, by Ricky Simón, he did land some good shots as the fight went on, and Ricky Simón definitely can leave himself open for that on the feet. Also has a tendency when he's mixing in the grappling too much to outwork himself or gas himself out. So I think that could also make him vulnerable as well. The keys of victory for Ricky Simón, guys, use takedowns if he can, and get that top control to dictate the fight. It's going to be difficult against Raoni Barcelos because he has a good grappling and wrestling game himself. But I do think he'll be able to outwork Barcelos on the feet, potentially landing some big shots, maybe even closing the show with another KO. I think that if he stays mindful of the counters and the wrestling and grappling that might come from the way of Raoni Barcelos and just can land his own shots, be in control and dictate the pace of this fight, he'll win by way of decision, maybe getting a finish if he finds it. Raoni Barcelos, on the other hand, his strengths, although this guy is a very dangerous striker. He's got knockout power. He has good movement, good counter striking. We saw him use this against Peyton Talbot. Also impressive with his submissions on the ground. Has the ability to grapple, get guys down to the ground, and get control. We saw this also against Peyton Talbot. Weaknesses for Barcelos, less consistent in maintaining that pressure on the feet, in my opinion. Sometimes he's a bit over-reliant on the power that he has on the feet, and when he's unable to find that finish, you kind of see him be a bit tentative out there. And also, I think his grappling can potentially be exploited if he's taken down. I don't know. We've seen him in any matchups where he is the nail from a grappling perspective, right? He's usually the one that's pushing that grappling. I think if he can catch Simón, these are keys to victory. If he can catch Simón with some powerful shots on the feet, maybe hurting him, make Ricky a bit more tentative on the feet or getting into those striking exchanges. I think if he can use that and then also use his movement and his footwork to evade the takedown or grappling exchanges that Ricky Simón's probably going to bring, if he can do all that and stay at distance on the feet, that Raoni Barcelos has a good chance of winning by way of decision as well. But guys, in this fight, I'm really liking Ricky Simón. Ricky Simón's shown, obviously Raoni Barcelos showed against Peyton Talbot, another young whippersnapper, how good he is. But Ricky Simón going up against Cameron Smotherman on short notice and getting that win over the undefeated Javid Basharat, I think that Ricky Simón has every opportunity to win this fight. I see Ricky winning by way of decision. That is my pick for this one. Fight number 10, we got Ismael Bonfim versus Chris Padilla. Ismael Bonfim, 29 years old, 5'8", 71-inch reach, 20 wins, 5 losses in his professional career, 2-2 in the UFC, 9 wins by way of KO at 45%, 4 wins by way of submission at 20%, 7 wins by way of decision at 35%, giving Bonfim a 65% finishing rate overall. Bonfim has 1 loss by way of KO, which is 20% of his losses, 4 losses by way of submission, giving him 80% of his losses. In his last 4 fights, he lost to Nazim Sadiqov. Obviously, his eye got busted the fuck up from that head kick. Before that, a win over Vince from Hell Pichel. Before that, a loss to Benoit Saint Denis. And before that, a win over Terrence McKinney. That was the one where Terrence McKinney was like smiling. He's like against the cage. Taking a look at Chris Padilla, 30 years old, 5'9" with a 74-inch reach, 16-6 as a pro, 3-0 in the UFC thus far. Padilla has 8 wins by way of KO at 50% KO rate, 5 wins by way of submission, a 31% submission rate, 3 wins by way of decision, a 19% decision rate, giving him a whopping 81% finishing rate, which is really solid. Padilla has 1 loss by way of KO, 16.67% of his losses. He has 2 losses by way of submission, 33% of his losses, and 3 losses by way of decision, 50% of his losses. Padilla's last 4 fights, he is on a solid win streak. A win over Jai Herbert. A lot of people either said it was a robbery or felt it should have gone his way. I see why it went his way. Prior to that, a win over Rongju. Before that, a win over Lontop. And before that, a win over James. Jumping into the strengths, weaknesses, keys to victory. Ismael Bonfim has that explosive striking. We've seen this with the knockout power, especially against Terrence McKinney. Aggressive and very good with his forward pressure. Also good volume and finishing ability at times. Weaknesses is he's definitely lesser experienced at the high level of the sport. He can be very reckless and leave openings on the feet at times as well, too. And I think at times he's shown that his chin might not be all there. I think that his defense can be exploited, especially on the feet and on the ground. Keys to victory for him is trying to land those early power shot combinations, hurting Padilla, trying to get him out of there by way of KO. He needs to stay composed and just capitalize on those moments. I think if he's not able to find the KO in round 1, he needs to stay aggressive, but he doesn't want to be overzealous because I feel like he has that tendency to gas out, which will just be very brutal for him as the rounds get late. Chris Padilla, on the other hand, very solid boxing and footwork from Chris Padilla. Very durable, too, and experienced at a higher level. Going up against Jai Herbert, who's a very, very technical striker. Also good at controlling the distance and pace of fights. Definitely like a bigger guy, too, for this weight class. Not really, I guess. Somewhat. It's hard to say. His weaknesses, though, not as much. Weaknesses for Chris Padilla, I think, could be potentially just being outgunned or outpowered on the feet potentially, but then also in those grappling exchanges, he has been submitted in the past, so he could be open to, like, if Bonfim's able to win in a grappling exchange, he could potentially latch up a submission and find a win that way. So Padilla's got to be very on his P's and Q's when it comes to those grappling exchanges. I think the keys of victory for Padilla, keep the fight at range, and utilize his solid, footwork, solid striking skills, land on Bonfim, maybe try to land that power shot, put him out. Use that footwork and volume, though, to win the rounds if he's not able to find that finish. I think he needs to capitalize when Bonfim overcommits because he's likely to overcommit on some of the strikes. He needs to find those moments, capitalize with his own shots. I do see Chris Padilla, guys, getting this one done by way of decision. I'm thinking that he is going to just out-volume, outpace, and ultimately win against Ismael Bonfim. Fight number 11, we got Muslim Salikov, Lucas Tracy's friend and former training partner, versus Uğur Medic, the doctor. Muslim Salikov, 41 years old. He's the other unk of welterweight. 5'11", 70-inch reach, a 22-5 professional record, 9-4 in the UFC, has 14 wins by way of KO, a 64% KO rate, 3 wins by way of submission, a 14% submission rate, 5 wins by way of decision, a 23% decision rate, giving Salikov a 77% finishing rate overall. He has 2 losses by way of knockout, 40% of his losses, 1 loss by way of decision, 2 losses by way of submission, another 40% of his losses, and 1 loss by way of decision, a 20% decision loss rate. His last 4 fights, as I mentioned before, highlight reel KO over Carlos Leal, who no one thought he would beat except for Bedtime MMA. Before that, a KO win over Song. Before that, a win over Ponzinibbio. Before that, a loss to Randy Brown. Uros, on the other hand, 32 years old, 6'1" with a 71-inch reach, 11-3 as a professional, 5-3 in the UFC. Medic has 9 wins by way of KO, an 82% KO rate, 2 wins by way of submission, an 18% submission rate, and 0 wins by way of decision, giving Medic a 100% finishing rate overall. Medic has lost by way of KO 1 time, 33% of his losses, and lost by way of submission 2 times, 67% of his losses. Whether it be a win or loss, Medic has never gone the distance, guys. His last 4 fights, win over Gilbert Urbina. He got dropped early, but then he actually ends up KOing Urbina. Before that, a loss to Punahele Soriano, got KO'd. Prior to that, a win over Tim Means, where he got a KO. And prior to that, a loss to Mincy Betts Orobai by way of submission. Taking a look at the strengths, weaknesses, keys to victory for both these gentlemen. Muslim Salikov, an elite kickboxer with a deep bag of tricks that he can pull in this fight, right? Very elite striking and also has KO power, whether it be with the hands or the feet. Excellent range control and footwork, and just an ability to land those very unorthodox kicks that make him dangerous for anyone in this division. He's very good at setting up those attacks as well. Weaknesses, less grappling from Muslim stuff than we've seen, especially from being from Russia. Also a big weakness I got to call out, guys. Salikov's 41 years old, so he is that unk. He's that older age, and I think he can fall victim to a very high output or high pressure from his opponents, especially being at that age. Keys to victory for Muslim Salikov. He needs to just use that creative striking, find those openings against Uros Medic, get Medic to overcommit and land a KO shot. I think that he can easily do it in this fight. He just has to be very smart about those exchanges because Medic has powerful hands himself. So if Muslim Salikov can read those strikes coming at him and counter effectively, especially what he did against Carlos Leal, he has every opportunity to land a KO shot. Uros Medic, very well-rounded, has good wrestling and grappling, also very powerful hands, as I mentioned, capable of controlling his opponents on the ground, but also capable of putting him out on the feet. Weaknesses for him, he's definitely a less polished striker or has less in his arsenal than Muslim Salikov. I also think he is a bit chinny at times. Like if he gets caught with a good shot, it's likely that he could be put out on the feet. I also think if he's not able to mix in some grappling and takedowns, that it's likely Salikov will own this fight on the feet for as long as it goes. Keys to victory for Medic: close the distance quickly, try to mix in that grappling and have Salikov kind of second guessing in that department, and just needs to do his best to kind of mix it up, not staying in one spot, especially not staying in one spot with the striking, because I do think Muslim Salikov, although older, has the upper hand when it comes to that. In this fight, guys, it was a really tough one for me. I'm going with Muslim Salikov. He's on a win streak. I do think that against Uros Medic, he can find that counter strike that maybe puts him out. I'm going to say Muslim Salikov by round 2 KO. All right, guys, we are finally at the co-main event of the evening. If you guys have enjoyed this, like I said, if you could please give this a like, comment below. Would love to hear from you all, and thank you for making it this far. We got Matt Schnell out of retirement versus Joseph Morales. They're using a picture of Joseph Morales back in the Reebok days. You can see those are some Reebok shorts he's got on. Matt Schnell, 35 years old, 5'8" with a 70-inch reach, 17-9 as a pro, 7-7 in the UFC. Schnell has 2 wins by way of KO, 12% KO rate, 9 wins by way of submission, a 53% submission rate, 5 wins by way of decision, a 29% decision rate, giving Schnell a finishing rate of 65%, which is definitely solid, especially for flyweight. Taking a look at his losses, Schnell has lost by way of KO 5 times, giving him a 55.56% KO loss rate. 3 losses by way of submission, 33% submission loss rate, and 1 loss by way of decision, an 11% decision loss rate. Last 4 fights for Schnell, he got a win over Jimmy Flick, where he then retired, but I guess he's back. Prior to that, lost to Cody Durden. Prior to that, lost to Steve Urseg. And prior to that, lost to Nicolau. I think those were all by way of KO, if I'm not mistaken. Joseph Morales, on the other hand, this is the comeback of Joseph Morales. He really proved himself on his last season of Ultimate Fighter and got the Ultimate Fighter Championship trophy in his last outing. Very big win for him. I was rooting for him, and he got it done. Morales is 31 years old, 5'6", 69-inch reach, 13-2 as a professional, 2-2 in the UFC, 2 wins by way of KO at 15% KO rate, 7 wins by way of submission, a 54% submission rate, 4 wins by way of decision, a 31% decision rate, giving Joseph Morales a 69% finishing rate, even better than Matt Schnell. Joseph Morales has lost twice in his career, one loss by way of KO at 50% and one loss by decision at 50% as well. Last 4 fights for Joseph Morales, he got that big win over Alibi, or I call him Alibi, his name's Alibi Idris. Prior to that, a win over Doe. Prior to that, a win over Honorio. And before that, a win over Worth. Taking a look at the strengths, weaknesses, keys of victory for Matt Schnell and Joseph Morales. Matt Schnell, well-rounded, sharp striker, definitely got longer strikes, especially because he's a bit taller and has longer reach for this weight class. Good movement and pace, but also very scrappy, guys. He's scrappy on the feet. He's scrappy on the ground. Matt Schnell is the type of guy, you're going to have to fucking put him out cold before he's out of there. Like, he is that type of dude. He's got that dog in him. Weaknesses for Schnell, he can very easily lose on the feet, right? Like, he'll land a shot and then sometimes be caught, and I think that he's very chinny. Like, when he gets caught, guys, he gets dropped. So I worry about that. I worry about that weight cut probably for him is what causes this. Definitely less powerful, too, on the feet. And I think at times it just seems like he is not always able to dictate the fight. It's more so like he's reactionary to what his opponents bring. Keys of victory for Matt Schnell, he needs to try to stay at range, land at range on Joseph Morales. He's going to be a bit taller, and I think his reach is a little bit longer. So he's just going to have to stay at range there and do his best to, win in that regard. He can also mix in the grappling, but I actually don't think he should, because I think Morales is very good on the ground. So I think the key to victory really is staying on the feet, staying at range, landing, picking and choosing the shots economically, and landing at range. Joseph Morales, guys, very athletic, very aggressive in not only his striking, but also his just overall game. Like, when he is in there for the kill. Very aggressive, not worried too much about what his opponent's throwing at him. He does a very good job at adapting to his opponent. A very good boxing and slick with, finding those attacks, but then also very good fight IQ. Like, I was surprised to see how well he was able to find those takedowns against opponents on The Ultimate Fighter, especially going up against some of the opponents that were better strikers. He was just able to mix in those takedowns very nicely and then get ground control. Weaknesses for Joseph Morales, sometimes, like I said, he can get caught in the feet and can be a bit of a less disciplined striker at times. I think that he definitely can struggle against those technically sharp strikers. Matt Schnell is technically sharp, but he's not as sharp with his defense, right? Keys of victory for Morales, I think if he can pressure and outvalue Matt Schnell and have him on the back foot, he is likely to win this by an easy decision, or pressure and then obviously be economical and useful with those takedowns, finding and using that good fight IQ to grab a takedown, get Schnell to the ground. Schnell will have those ability to throw up some scrappy submission attempts, but I think that this is Joseph Morales' fight, guys. I think that he is likely to win this one by way of decision, or potentially a KO if he's able to land a big shot on Matt Schnell. All right, guys, we are at the main event of the evening. Not the most sought-after main event that we've ever seen, but it should be a fun one nonetheless. Gabriel Bonfim versus Randy Rude Boy Brown. Gabriel Bonfim's 28 years old, 6'1", 72.5-inch reach, 18-1 as a pro, 5-1 in the UFC. He has 3 wins by way of knockout, a 17% KO rate, 13 wins by way of submission, a 72% submission rate, 2 wins by way of decision, an 11% decision rate, giving Bonfim an 89% finishing rate, which is fucking fantastic. Bonfim has 1 loss by way of KO. That was from Nicholas Dalby. Nicholas Dalby's a dog, guys. His last 4 fights, win over Stephen Thompson, a win over Chaos Williams, and a win over Ange Lusa. Prior to that loss to Dalby, as I mentioned. Randy Rude Boy Brown, 35 years old, 6'3", with an 78-inch reach, 20 wins with 6 losses, 14-6 in the UFC. Randy has 8 wins by way of KO at 40%, 5 wins by way of submission at 25%, 7 wins by way of decision at 35%, giving him a 65% finishing rate. It's less than Bonfim, but still very good. Brown has 2 losses by way of KO, 33% of his losses, 2 losses by way of submission, another 33% there, and then 2 losses by way of decision, another 33% there. Taking a look at his last 4 fights, he had a statement KO win over Nicholas Dalby. Nicholas Dalby was landing. He hurt Brown at some points, and then Brown finds that KO shot, puts him out flat on his face. Huge win for Randy Brown. I think that was Nicholas Dalby's first loss by way of KO, if I'm not mistaken. Prior to that, a very boring split decision loss to Brian Battle. Prior to that, a win over Zaleski dos Santos, where he almost got the finish at the end. Prior to that, a KO win over Muslim Selikov. And guys, this one is an interesting matchup because you got the young Gabriel Bonfim, right? His strengths, very strong grappling and submission skills. That's shown in that 72% submission rate. He's very aggressive on the ground and in scrambles, very good at finding those submissions when he gets to the ground. Also good cardio and submission threats, but he doesn't really honestly threaten too much on the feet, in my opinion. Weaknesses for him, very less experienced when it comes to going up against those elite strikers. He went up against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and got pieced the fuck up. A lot of people thought he should have lost that fight, actually. He definitely struggles against those guys that are technical on the feet and have good takedown defense. I just think that when it comes to this fight, guys, it's a matter of like the keys of victory are if Gabriel Bonfim can get Randy Brown to the ground, he can win the fight. If he can't, I think he loses this fight because I think that Randy Brown, when we look at his strengths, very long reach, very good at using his reach, staying at range, landing those sharp 1-2s, very good movement and distance management, just very powerful too with those strikes. I mean, you've seen him hurt or drop guys that are really good in the UFC. Also, he has solid takedown defense, guys. Weaknesses for Randy Brown is I just think that sometimes when, an opponent uses a game plan similar to what Brian Battle used, he can be a bit out-grapple or out-strength against the cage by his opponents. Now, Brian Battle didn't make weight for that fight. No surprise there. But I think that Randy Brown has showed a big weakness there in it being able to be kind of out-muscled against the fence. Also, Randy Brown has been caught. We saw Jack Della Maddalena land on him, drop him, and then, choke him out. So he's definitely been caught on the feet as well. So he does have to be on his P's and Q's here. He doesn't want to have Gabriel Bonfim land some crazy random strike that hurts him. So I think that when I look at his keys to victory, it's just staying at range, landing the sharp 1-2s, and making sure he doesn't get taken to the ground by Bonfim. If he does, he needs to make sure he's on his P's and Q's with that sub defense, okay? In this matchup, guys, it was really hard for me to choose. I can see why anybody would go the Bonfim route because obviously he's tested, he's ranked now, he beat Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. But guys, I am just not really sold on the Bonfim brothers anymore, to be honest with you. I'm thinking that Randy Brown is going to just use those dangerous, long 1-2 strikes, and I think that he'll be able to hurt Gabriel Bonfim. I could even see Randy Brown knocking Gabriel Bonfim out. I'm going to say Randy Brown wins this one by way of decision, though. I think he'll hurt Bonfim, and if he can stay away from the grappling exchanges, stay away from the submission threats, and just land on the feet, Randy Brown wins this one by a technical 5-round decision, and that's what I'm going with. Randy Rude Boy Brown getting the W. Those are my picks and predictions for UFC Fight Night that's happening on 11/8, which I believe is UFC Fight Night Vegas 111, if I'm not mistaken. Make sure you guys tune in. Would love to hear from you all. Comment below what your thoughts are, who you've got winning in each fight. Love all of you guys. And if you aren't subscribed to Fite Feed, I'm going to ask that you please subscribe to Fite Feed so you can stay on top of all the new content that I'll be posting. Thank you all again. I'll see you in the next one.